and just messed up as I am, right? So so just gives you all a lot of hope, because if I can do it, then you can do it too. For us, the Jeremiah 29 verse to a really charge to the exiles was really important: to build houses, plant gardens, marry, have children, and pray for the city that we've been called to. And so part of that has really been us trying to be faithful in how we do that. I can give you tons and tons of stories of patient encounters that I've had, students, people that I've gotten to connect with, births, deaths, all these places where I have tried to be the hands and feet of Christ. But I think all the other people on this panel probably have really cool stories too. So one of the perspectives that I want to share with you all is what it means to move your family here, and then understand that you're ministering to your staff. So a couple of the stories that I could share is one is Stacy and Tony. Stacy was one of our nurses on our team. A really, really sweet nurse, and she and her husband had a off again, on again kind of relationship. They had 3 kids, and one time I remember they were going through a lot of difficult times, and went to Stacey and I said, how are things going? She's like, well, you know what? It's actually been much better. Yesterday, Tony and I, we went to the park and we had a picnic together, and we decided to start having date nights. And I'm like, date nights? Well, date nights, that's different. You don't hear that in these communities. And she said, yeah, we started doing date nights because I heard about you and Jesse doing date nights, and that really inspired us. And we feel like if we're going to make this work, we're going to start having date nights. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Maybe Jesse and I should start having date nights. And so again, just a really good reminder of how ministering to our staff is just as important to the patient at the bedside. We've got crazy amounts of stories, but one of the things that I'm realizing more and more is in my administrator role now is understanding just the impact that we have in changing and transforming the communities, to be developing policies, to be paying fairly, to be making sure that that women and men are being paid the same, and so that's really been really powerful for me. And I remember some of the transformational stories that I've started hearing. We've got one manager who actually started off kind of at front lines, and slowly we started seeing just really great potential for her, and kind of moved up and moved up. And I remember the day that I asked her to be a manager on our team, she took me aside and said, you know, this is the first time anyone's ever told me that my voice mattered. And this is an older woman who it was about 5 years from retirement, but she was about 60 years old at the time, and she said, Geogy, I've never had someone tell me that my voice really matters until I came to Dayspring. It's here. Prior to that, I was told I need to be a wife, I need to be a preacher's wife, I need to be subservient, I need to be quiet, and I just need to support everyone else. But this is the first time I've ever heard that my voice matters. And I remember sharing just the fact that she was made in the image of God, and that the Lord delights in her and every one of her talents, and that the Lord has granted her that. And so for 5 years, she faithfully served, learning her voice at the age of 60 to 65. But one of my coolest stories for me is watching another one of our staff that has grown through the years. She started off as a student nurse, and then eventually a nurse, and now she is in management also, and that's over 20 years. But one of the coolest things that I've seen is her struggle in her faith. Eventually start asking the right questions, start attending church, and then just seeing her struggle in her family life with her husband and kids, But now she is such a strong pillar of faith. It's really cool. She will often send me devotionals. She'll actually do devotionals at our meetings. And this is someone who used to be quiet and very scared of herself, but now just to hear her share devotions at our board of directors meetings is crazy amazing, I think. For her to send me scriptures, send me podcasts, to send me songs and videos, to just say, to encourage me, to bless me. And that's when I think the story of Jeremiah comes alive for me, because this was someone that I was ministering to 20 years ago. And now, 20 years later, she is ministering to me. And so anyway, I could share stories all night long, but I think we've got an amazing panel to hear from. So grateful to be here. Thank you so much for letting me share. But yeah, incarnational ministry, that's been what we've dedicated our life to, and the Lord has just continued to bless us because of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Geogy. Yeah, we've got some wild stories here, so we'd love to share more of that with you later. And basically everybody that's sharing tonight, they are happy to meet up with you by email or phone to continue to share in the future. So next, I'm going to have Callie Luecke. She is coming from North Dakota. Callie, if you would like to share, tell us a little bit about yourself. And
sure, yeah. So my name is Callie Luecke. I'm in Fargo, North Dakota. So I grew up in North Dakota, kind of in a small town in rural northeast North Dakota. And then after college, I moved to Memphis. And I worked for Christ Community, then Resurrection with Angela. And then I went to PA school there. And during my time in Memphis, during my first year when I went to Memphis, I worked as an intern at the clinic there. And it really was I moved there for this, trying to figure out what I knew. I wanted to do medicine. I knew that I wanted to follow Jesus and trust him with it, but I didn't really know what that looked like. And I wasn't sure if that was to go through to the med school way, the PA school way, kind of what that route was. And so during that year, I just kind of got more experience, and God led me through the PA route. So I finished up PA school in Memphis, and then I moved to Chicago. And so I worked at Lawndale Christian Health Center for a couple of years. My first job out of PA school at Lawndale was hard, so hard. It was way past the vertical learning curve, but really I learned so much there, and I'm so thankful to have worked at a Christian health center like Lawndale. It's kind of such great training, and to work with so many people who love Jesus, who just practice really good medicine and were great teachers. But so I worked there for 2 years, and kind of crazily enough, as God planned stories, in between finishing up Memphis and moving to Chicago, I came home to visit my family for a month. And during that time, I met my now husband in my parents' kitchen. He was a friend of my brother's, and so we dated long distance the whole time that I was in Chicago. And then kind of as we were trying to figure out where we were going to move once we got married, we decided to come back to North Dakota. He's also from here. And so we live in Fargo, which for the rest of the country, it's a fairly small city, but for us in North Dakota, it's a pretty large little metropolis. And I work at a community health center there. It's called Family Healthcare. I've been there for a couple of years now, and it's not a faith-based clinic. And so it's not a CCHF clinic. It is a clinic that we care for a lot of refugees and new Americans, but I work mostly with our homeless and do a lot of homeless care. So it has been a unique transition, especially going from a clinic that was called Lawndale Christian Health Center, where it was in the name. It was it made sense to pray with patients. It made sense to be able to kind of help care for spiritual care, to a clinic where it doesn't. And so it's just been an interesting thing to navigate that. And I think also just COVID, we've kind of transitioned to doing a lot of telehealth, and that makes it harder to figure out how to really love our patients and kind of bridge that gap, even sometimes from caring for them medically to caring spiritually. So that, yeah, it's been interesting. But as I was thinking about incarnational, the words kind of that came to my mind was called this thin space, which might not make sense until I kind of tell you the story. So when I lived in Memphis, for 3 of the 4 years that I lived there, I ran a guest house for Christ Community, then Resurrection. So students that would come to stay at those clinics would stay at the guest house. And this guest house was right in the heart of this neighborhood called Orange Mound, which is a predominantly Black neighborhood. And I'm like this potato farm girl living in this predominantly Black neighborhood. And there's just a lot of cultural things from that. And just kind of, I feel like, yeah, trying to figure out how to navigate what that looks like to be in the neighborhood and to love my neighbors. And often we would do like this Monday night dinner where anyone, like all the students were invited and whoever else wanted to join could come. And one night we had like multiple kids from the neighborhood that were there. And then there were these 2 people that were doing an article on one of the residents through Crew. They were like this journalist and his photographer. And so they just happened to show up as well. And then, like the night kind of transitioned into this like worship night. It was just this really sweet evening, but it was also crazy chaotic. Like I kind of always thought one of my favorite parts of it, there was, I had a neighborhood kid and this guy was British. And so they were both speaking English, but they like could not understand each other. So I was like translating for them, like one to the other. And it was just like this moment, they're like, wait, what is going on? But at the end of the night, this man that was the journalist, this British man, he told me, he's like, this is a thin space. And I was like, huh. He was like, a thin space, like amidst the chaos of the world, like heaven feels near. And I just like have always loved that picture of like the chaos of the world, but like heaven feels near. And it's something that I've like thought about too in the exam room with patients of like, how do we create like a thin space in this exam room with the patient that like heaven would feel near? And like, not that happens every time with every patient, but there's times. And like, that's like my husband and I, like our desire for our home is like for our home, and our prayer often is like that it'd be a thin space where heaven feels near amidst the craziness of the world. So that, yeah, that was kind of the main, like kind of words that kept coming to my mind as I was thinking about incarnational ministry. But yeah, there's a ton of other stories. There's a ton of stories from the Orange Mound days. It feels like definitely now living in Fargo, like life looks different. And I think working at a non-CCHF clinic, just even like being in this helps me realize like, wow, we really need community because it's so easy to feel super isolated. And like there are a few other believers that I work with and like kind of try to stay together. Like even today I had a patient I treat Hep C with on a hepatitis C team, and we had this patient we could not get a hold of, and my pharmacist that I work with is a believer, and she's like, I tried and tried, I can't get a hold of her. She's like, can you try? And so like, right before I called, I was like, Lord, like please help me, like let her answer the phone, because like she was getting behind in her treatment, and we were afraid like she wouldn't get treated, and she like answered the phone. And so when I called the pharmacist, I was like, she answered. She's like, how did she answer? I was like, I don't know. I just prayed that she would answer, and she did. And so it's just fun to see like God cares about those little details and is a part of that in every day. So.
Thank you so much, Callie. That is awesome. And like Callie was saying, not working at a CCHF clinic. For those who are new to CCHF, we have clinics in different under-resourced communities, but half the members of CCHF actually don't work for a CCHF clinic. They work like Callie does in a non-clinic, or they're like not in primary care, so they're in hospital settings, all different kinds of specialties. So you obviously can do this type of ministry no matter what kind of background you have, and it can physically be anywhere. So God calls all of us to do different things because we're all wired differently. Like He's given us each individual gifts and talents so that we can do whatever He's calling us to do. So thank you, Callie, for sharing. And last, we have Kate Abraham. And Kate has also many cross-cultural experiences. So I'm going to let Kate introduce herself and tell you kind of how God has been guiding her all this time.
Okay, so I'm a third-year family medicine resident at Cahaba Medical Care, which Cahaba Family Medicine Residency, which we also kind of nickname like the Resurrected Res. So Res, where Cali had to close due to some funding issues, and then a lot of the program moved down to Birmingham, Alabama, and so that's where I am a resident now. And my husband, Paul, he's also a third-year resident. We have 5 kids, 2 biological that are 2 and 4, and then 3 through the foster care system that are 15, 16, and 6. And yeah, so how I kind of ended up in residency there, it actually started a lot through CCHF. I went to my first CCHF conference during my first year of medical school and had felt like a desire to like practice incarnational living or like medicine during medical school. There was an apartment complex, I went to UNC, near the school where a lot of refugees were resettled, and had thought about moving in. And everyone like in my like Christian circle in medical school was like, that's crazy. Like, why would you ever do that? And then I went to CCHF and everyone was like, that's awesome. I'm already doing that. So it was a really cool time where like the Lord confirmed that, yeah, that like this idea of living among the people that you're serving, that like, that's what Jesus did. And that's what the Lord wants for us too. So at my next CCHF conference, I met Paul. So that was also wonderful. And so yeah, we were able to kind of like start that ministry of living in the neighborhood together. And yeah, so when we were thinking about where to go for residency, at first I thought peds and Paul thought general surgery, but then as we like learned more about the faith-based family medicine programs, we felt like what we wanted to prioritize during our training was our walk with the Lord. And so felt like that's maybe where we'd be able to do that best. So we really wanted a program that was faith-based, and we really wanted a program that was close to a community that was living among the underserved, because we felt like once we started doing that, like we could never not do that, like living among the people that we felt like the Lord had called us to. And we were also really interested in trying like a house church model of like worshiping with other believers. And so we were looking for programs that did that. And so that's how we ended up at Cahaba. Paul felt like really called to stay committed to what resurrection was, because it had been so transformative. Like we got to stay in one of the guest houses and that type of thing during medical school. But I felt called to something new. So at the beginning of like applying, res was still res, and we couldn't figure out like we're called to res, but something new. But then through the program closing and then something new opening, we found that the Lord had really been like so gracious and really confirming where we were supposed to be. So yeah, what does it mean to me to like make our dwelling in a certain place with a certain people? So yeah, during medical school, we were like doing the international thing with refugee neighbors, and we feel called to go overseas long-term, hopefully to Afghanistan, which was where most of our neighbors were from. And then coming to Birmingham, our clinic's like 2 miles from the Birmingham jail. And yeah, it's a similar neighborhood to Memphis with like a lot of underserved, low socioeconomic status, mostly African-American community. And so that transition was really hard just because I didn't feel like those were like the people that the Lord had placed on my heart to serve long-term. But he was so good, and just had to ask him like in prayer that he would like help me love my neighbor, and he really did that. And so that's been really sweet. And I've seen that, yeah, just like the picture of Jesus, like leaving heaven to come to earth, to live among us, like leaving something that's comfortable to show love. That like that was so huge in how we understand God's love, that we know Jesus experienced everything that we did, and he can relate to what's happening in our lives. Really see that same picture through like incarnational living. Yeah, that we would leave like something that's like maybe more comfortable, to not just like imagine what our patients are going through, but to really experience it a lot. And not that we're 100% experiencing exactly what they are, but to like at least get closer to that. And like kind of enter into like a more like heart-to-heart vulnerable relationship with them. Sorry, I'm not talking about medicine very much. I actually really don't like medicine. So that's what I'm talking about. I thought I was going to drop out of med school and thought I was going to drop out of residency, but the Lord has been so good, and yeah, just showing me that medicine's more than just being in the library, memorizing things on up to date. So yeah, so that's kind of what I see out of like why we should make our dwelling in a certain place among a certain people, like what Jesus did. So awesome story about like how that's transformed our family. So in our neighborhood, so we entered residency, both being residents, and I was pregnant and we had a baby and we were like, what's wrong with us? So I had the baby, then the intern year finishes and we'd like developed kind of a close relationship with two of our neighbors that were teenagers, not really that close though. And it kind of, they just, yeah, their stories, theirs to tell, but had just had a really like traumatic life, and like their relationship with their family kind of just, and it had already been broken with their biological parents, but their extended family just kind of eventually broke one day, and like they were left on our porch with all their belongings. And so they ended up living with us. And then we kind of like officially became their foster parents, and got to welcome them as a part of our family. And yeah, it was just something like if I hadn't like physically been in the neighborhood, and like been there to like know them and like get to know their family, that the Lord never like would have invited us into that. So feel like out of that step of obedience of saying, hey, like I saw this in Jesus's life, like, man, I know it's going to be hard and uncomfortable, like, but like I want to model everything that like Christ did. He just like gives you these like incredible, like supernatural, like how like am I in residency and I get to like love on these kids like as their foster mom, like that's like shouldn't be happening, right? I should be like depressed and crying and like locked in a hospital somewhere, but the Lord just like has different plans, and there's so much like joy and fruit in that. So yeah, and so they've been with us for about 1.5 years now, and we got to see Quan, he's 16, get baptized in the spring, which was like so incredible. And I'm just seeing like the biggest like transformation in each of their hearts, just in being in a place that's safe and loved. And we're not the only ones making them feel safe and loved, like the whole residency and our church are like so involved in their lives. So yeah, it's been real. And so also there were like steps of that, you know, like wanting to like know like what my patients are going through and understand their lives and how I can best serve them and best like share the love of Christ with them. Like moving in was a step, and I like was kind of starting to get it, but then like being even more immersed that like they're a part of like my family now, like my like in my home family. I mean, like just like the rapport that I built with like the medical assistants at our clinic, and like the conversations that, you know, like now I have kids that go to the same school that like my patients go to, and we get to talk about like the Parker football game and like how online school is such a drag, and like has given us like this huge passion for like public schools and want to send our biological kids there too whenever they open. Please, Lord, let's open. And yeah, so it's just been a really sweet thing that like, you know, like we wouldn't have even known, you know, we just kind of would have been like on the sidelines, like missing like what the Lord was doing in that community if it had just been our 9 to 5. But because the Lord kind of has like opened our eyes to like, man, like you guys need to leverage every area of your life for the gospel and for what I'm doing. And like, there aren't decisions that get to stay on the sidelines, right? Like, you know, like picking a residency or like a PA school or whatever. Those are things where you're like, oh, I have to seek the Lord's will. But like some other things like kind, you know, like living, okay, well, this is like convenient and, you know, comfortable. And that sounds great, but really asking the Lord like specifically where he wants you has just brought like endless joy and fruit and like the best opportunities to disciple and evangelize, and yeah, has just brought us so much closer with him. So I set a timer and my screen went off. Oh crap, I'm so sorry, Jesse, should have cut me off. I'm over my time.
Oh no, you're fine.
Looking forward to I'd love to talk with every one of you at some point, and I've already talked with some of you anyways. Okay, here we
go. Thank you for sharing, Kate. Yeah, so everybody, you've heard these incredible stories from 3 different people, very different places they've come from, very different places where they serve. And so I hope you kind of got this picture that what does it mean to embody Christ is not going to look the same for everybody, but the heart is all the same. Like we want to honor Jesus, where Jesus is our model. And what I think is important is that you're hearing people, you know, Kate's in training, Callie and Geogy are working, but it's at every stage that we're supposed to, there's no one day in the future I'm going to share about Jesus or be cross-cultural. God calls us wherever we are right now, and no matter how busy we are, there's some sort of way that we need to be pressing into that and praying into that. So we're going to go into breakout rooms, and this was the highlight last month when we met, because This is your chance to like hang out with people, because when do you get to hang out with people? And most likely they're like-minded. But feel free to be honest and vulnerable and share. All the facilitators tonight are willing to share their contact information if you want to follow up with them. You can contact me if you want any of their information if you're in a different group. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up. After 30 minutes, your facilitator will let you know, hey, and I'll put a little message on there. If you need to go, you can go, but if you want to stay and keep talking, I'm gonna actually leave the chat rooms open for an hour if you guys are like, let's just connect, or your facilitator might be like, peace out people, it's late, I gotta go to bed, but you all can keep the conversation going. Like, you're totally welcome to do that. We want this to be your time to retreat with each other and take care of each other. So you're not going to be coming back to the main room. You'll just be leaving from your room. If you have to leave early, just let your facilitator know. I'm putting in so there's the questions, and I'll put that also in the individual ones. And again, feel free to contact me directly if you have any prayer requests, because we want to be praying for you all. We know that in this time of training, it's really hard. So we want to help in some sort of way. I had a student or a resident just email me and said, I was trying to come, but the water broke in our house, and so I can't make it to the meeting. I'm like, I'm praying for you. So life happens, right? So we need each other to lean on. So let me close us in a little prayer, and then you all will be scattered. So Jesus, thank you for this time. It is just so precious to be with brothers and sisters in Christ. Help us to always seek your face, knowing that you are the giver of all hope. You are full of grace, and we're so thankful for that. And help us to seek your truth. Be in all these breakout rooms and all the conversations, and surprise us with joy in all of it. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all. I will see you all later.